welcome in. It's good to see everybody. We missed you guys. It's good to be back, good to be home. Appreciate Mr. Roy filling in for me last Wednesday night. Thanks very much. I'm sure that went great, and all the guys on Sunday also. Several of you know we had a staycation and lots of work on our deck, and we're still working on our deck, but we're making progress, let me tell you. So anyway, no, it's good to see everybody. We did miss you guys a lot. If you'll turn to 1 Kings 3, I know it's been several weeks since we've been in our location, but that's where we left off. 1 Kings chapter 3, we've been talking a lot about the wisdom of Solomon. We've gotten into this section. It's going to carry on just a little bit more. And as we do that, we're also going to describe tonight his knowledge. Now, one of these things is like, but not just like, the other, and we understand that. We often point out in a comparison contrast that while they're similar, knowledge and wisdom, there is one that depends on the other, but the one is actually independent of the other. But ideally, the two of these blend together. So what do we often say about the difference between wisdom and knowledge? What is that?
Wisdom, how we use knowledge.
Very good. There you go. So knowledge, let's back up then. So knowledge would be what? Think about the base of the word. Okay, good. Know. Okay, and it's not like I think I know, or I hope I know, or I think I know and I'm wrong, but it's the knowledge, it's the understanding of facts. That's what knowledge is. So you glean these facts and you have them in your mind. Okay, so as he's told us though, the difference between wisdom and knowledge, wisdom is taking those facts that one has learned, and there's an ability and a willingness to put those into practice, to know how to apply them in life. So knowledge is I have all these facts that have entered into my head. Wisdom is I can take these facts and I can sort them in a systematic way to help me and to help others in life. So that's the difference between the two. I thought you might appreciate this. I have just a few sayings about wisdom, and it kind of expresses what it is that's been stated here just in different ways. So some have said that knowledge is knowing what to say, whereas wisdom is knowing when to say it. Knowledge knowing what to say, wisdom is knowing when to say it. Very similar to that, knowledge is being aware of what you can do. Wisdom is knowing when not to do it. Okay, so knowledge is I could say this, and I could do this. But wisdom says, it might not be the best thing to say or to do, even though you could right now, and even though it might be true. And on the other side of this, as we saw just a moment ago, wisdom has to do with, I know I could or I could say this, and I also know I could or could not say that, but something needs to be said or something needs to be done in this situation. So wisdom helps us to decipher when those exact moments are. From the wise old owl, knowledge speaks, but wisdom listens. That corresponds a little bit with James, the first chapter. Okay, we have all this information that we're learning from God's Word, and all this information we're learning about the world, but we're also taught in James 1 about the need and the opportunities to acquire wisdom. And for that to happen, in part, we're told, let every man be, or woman for that matter, let every man or woman be swift to hear or listen, slow to speak. Now, in the context of James 1, we're trying to produce wisdom in our lives. Okay, so if we learned all these facts, sometimes it's, I want to share these, I want to say this, I want to do this. And there are moments where that's good, but sometimes wisdom would say, now's not a good time to speak or to say that thing. It's not a good time to act or to do that thing. Knowledge speaks, wisdom listens. From the 19th century British poet laureate, Alfred Lord Tennyson, knowledge comes, but wisdom lingers. Ooh, that's a deep one if you think about it. That sounds like an author would write that one. Knowledge comes, but wisdom lingers. Think back to your high school years, maybe college also. You're constantly filling your head with all of these facts and cramming for all of these tests. And you learn all of these incredible things. And then 5 days later, how much of it do you retain? and even on past lives, we're constantly learning. I love watching shows, especially history ones, and I'm filling my head with all these neat historical facts, and I'm always going to remember that and this, and And then, a month later, how much of that have you reached? So we're always learning. Our heads are being filled with knowledge, and we have to keep doing that. That's very important. But have you ever noticed that wisdom really isn't something that comes and goes? It tends to be, for instance, if you meet someone at this day that has a lot of wisdom, and wow, I'm really impressed by that, and then you run across the same person 10 years later, the individual probably isn't suddenly a dummy. 10 years. Seriously, have you thought about that? Knowledge comes, and it also kind of tends to go, it gets circulated around, but wisdom tends to stay and to build with those who are wise. Knowledge comes from learning. Wisdom comes from living. Knowledge from learning, okay? A lot of academics that are involved in that. Wisdom, life experiences. We tend to gain more of it there. And the final one that I may appreciate the most, from Mile Kington, who was not only a writer, but also a musician. Knowledge is understanding that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not putting that tomato in a fruit salad. Okay, so hopefully that helps us in our discussion of knowledge and wisdom. One is like, but not just like the other. One, Heath, entirely depends on the other, but one can actually exist totally apart from the other one. But whenever knowledge is done right, it's always going to be mingled into wisdom. And we're going to see the combination of these two things as we continue to look at the early reign of our King Solomon. So we found out early in chapter 3 that he makes this great request of God. God writes him a blank check from heaven. I'll give you anything you want. You just tell me, I'll sign and date it. Everything's taken care of. And he says, okay, well, I need wisdom to better govern your people. I don't have a clue. I'm like a little kid in your presence. And even though he's not a child, so a lot of humility that he shows in that statement. And God's so impressed by it, not only does he pour out wisdom in his life, unlike anyone who's ever lived, unlike anyone who would come after him, with, of course, one exception that we'll discuss tonight. And now we see this judgment, or this wisdom of Solomon in full display in the judgments that he's giving among his people. So we're in chapter 3, and we're picking up in verse 16. We're so glad to have everyone. 1 Kings 3, where we are. 1 Kings 3, verse 16. Now 2 women who were harlots came to the king, and they stood before him. This is kind of a strange approach right here. 2 harlots. We know what that are. What those people are. Those are 2 prostitutes who come and stand before the king. Well, wait a minute. This is a godly nation, and you would think this shouldn't be going on. And if it is, that they would be showing their faces before the king. This isn't anything new, even among God's people. Do you recall way back in Genesis 38? We're not going to turn to it and read it for time reasons. But back in Judges, I think. Genesis is what I meant. Genesis 38 involving Judah, that's where the J comes in. Judah and Tamar. And he has this out-of-wedlock relationship with this lady who turns out to be his sister-in-law. But why does he ever engage in this activity with her in the first place? What does he notice about her? She has something over her face. There's a veil that has been put over her face, and that's the behavior of a prostitute. And he's going to do some work where his herds are found, by the way. This is among God's people. And this kind of thing, I mean, it's not new. It had gone on for some time. And this is the case here. Now, if you're wondering, well, what are prostitutes in this godly nation in the kingdom of Israel doing alive? Shouldn't they be executed by law, is what I mean by that. Not exactly under the Old Testament. Who would be executed for improper sexual behavior under the Old Testament in the kingdom of Israel? Okay, very good. Adulterers and adulteresses, okay? They would be. Homosexuals would be also, okay? And there's situations involving rape, and there could be executions that go on there also. But if you look back through the sexual laws of God's people under the law of Moses, and don't take it the wrong way, it's not approved of, okay? It's never okayed by God, but it's not people automatically lose their lives just if they're involved in some kind of sensual activity between 2 consenting adults who are not married. Again, God doesn't approve of that. That's sin, but those people aren't to be executed simply because of that behavior. So if that helps any, verse 16, now 2 women who are harlots or prostitutes, they come to the king and they stand before him. Okay, I want to take a step back here and consider the, for lack of a better way of putting it, the work of these ladies. What they're doing is selling out their body. They're making money for the abuse of their bodies. Now, what would you think, just with that information alone, about the moral level of these 2 people? Where does the moral compass reside here? Probably lower than what it should be. Now, that doesn't mean they have no morality at all, but it does indicate that morality is not the most important thing, probably, in their lives. I think that helps to point out as we go into this story to help to understand some of the details of it. So verse 17, one woman said, "O my Lord," speaking to the king just means sir, it's a term of respect, "this woman and I dwell in the same house." Okay, that's an interesting detail also. The fact that they're staying under the same roof and she addresses her as a woman would suggest to us that they're probably not family, else she would explain that in some way. So they're probably not family, they're staying under the same roof. Okay, what's another possibility here? It would seem to me, I don't know, where'd that come from? Oh, back there, thanks. Very quiet. Nobody wants to, I was telling Vanessa, I said, I'm going to use the word brothel tonight, and I don't know if anyone will tell me afterwards. Someone might say something about it like being old-fashioned. I was like, what do you call it? I mean, I haven't heard a newer term for that. But, other one, huh? Okay, there you go. I didn't think about that. That would be a very, I like the expression. Yeah, I'll say that. House of ill repute. I'd forgotten about that one, Roy. Thank you. Okay, so it's probably that. I don't think that these are lesbians, okay? It doesn't seem that from the information that we have here. Doesn't seem like they're family. They're staying under the same roof. They're in the same business, okay, and probably a part of a brothel. Now, if you're in the same business and you live in close proximity to one another, what kind of relationship does that often produce between the two? Now, for instance, let's take it out of individuals' hands and let's just go businesses. In our area, we have Walmart, and then pretty close to that, we have Price Cutter. Okay, you have companies that are in the same business very close to each other. What do we call those in the business world? They are competitors. They're rivals, okay? And I think, at least in part, that's probably what's going on with these two. And I'm loosely going to call this a mutual business in which they are involved. And it seems like maybe they're a little bit rivals, perhaps. So let's read more about them. So the one woman says, "O king, this woman and I, we live in the same house," probably a part of a brothel, "and I gave birth while she was in the house. Then it happened the 3rd day after I'd given birth that this woman also gave birth." Well, this is the house of babies. Well, that's interesting. You engage in this kind of behavior, and there are some results to that, so that makes a lot of sense. So the one woman has conceived. She might not even know who the father is, maybe true of the other one. And she says, 3 days later, this woman, she was pregnant, and she gives birth also. "And we were together, and no one was in the house with us except the 2 of us in the house." And I don't know if this is just like at the exact moments that birth was given. I think it's probably through this span of days. Now remember, this is a place of business, as a house of ill repute, Roy. It is still a place of business, so it doesn't sound like the business is booming at this moment. I think there's a reason for that. These 2 ladies are very pregnant and giving birth to babies and right around the same time. So that makes sense that there's no one else in the house around these days that these births transpire. Verse 19, "And this woman's son," this lady speaking, the first woman, "this woman, the other woman's son, died in the night because she lay on him." And that's a good reminder about baby safety, and we call it crib safety. Today, it's really not a good thing for a mother and a baby to sleep in the same bed together, and mother's often very tired after the whole birthing experience. So she rolls over on the child at night, lays on him, suffocates him. So she arose, this lady accuses, in the middle of the night and took my son from my side. Remember, they're staying in the same house, so it wouldn't be that difficult to do or just kind of sneak in. And she took my son from my side while your maidservant slept, and laid her, my child, in her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom. She exchanges these children, one living and one dead, in the middle of the night. And when I rose in the morning to nurse my son, there he was dead. But when I had examined him in the morning, indeed, I could tell he was not my son, whom I had born. Well, about that time, the other woman said, no, she has it all wrong. This is backward. The living one is my son, and the dead one is your son. First woman chimes back in, no, but the dead son is your son, and the living one is my son. Thus they spoke before the king. And so you have this classic instance of not he said, she said, but she said, she said. So which one are you supposed to believe? And the stories are exactly the same, but about the other one. Now, knowledge would tell you, just a simple comprehension of facts, that one of the two is lying. But you need wisdom to help decipher which one of the two here is telling the truth. Verse 23, and the king says, here's my problem. She says, the one says, this is my son who lives, and your son is the dead one. And the other says, no, but your son is the dead one, and my son is the living one. So the king says, we're going to solve this right now. Parents, and I know we have a lot of grandparents in this room too. I'm sure you handle things differently as grandparents, but I'm sure you recall as parents, and some of us dealing with it right now. You have two bickering children over the same thing. It's the exact toy. And the one comes to you whining and crying, I had this toy first and something. What's the other one always say? No, it's the same story, okay? Now, I know we're completely stupid as parents, but knowledge dictates that one of these two wonderful angels is telling a sweet little white lie to us, okay? Now, we probably don't know, though, which one. How do we figure this out? My wife is wonderful. She's terrific with the kids. Sometimes I'm a little short whenever it comes to these kind of things. I just don't have a lot of patience for crying, and especially not for whining, okay? And so if I have two little snot-nosed brats coming to me whining and crying over the same toy, can you guess what my way is of solving it really quickly? Okay, now neither one of you gets the toy, all right? I'm not saying that's the best way to handle things. I'm saying that's an impatient dad way of handling things, but the king tends to take my approach right here in this matter. So we're in chapter 3 and in verse 24. And the king said, all right, let's solve it. You're both fighting over the same thing, and each of you saying the same thing. We'll take care of this right now. Bring me a sword. Always a great toy for kids, or just a child present, that kind of thing. So, bring me a sword. So they brought a sword before the king, and the king said, okay, now I want you to divide the living child in two. But in this case, he's not going to take it apart. Maybe I guess I should be smarter like Solomon. Instead of, just let me go get my chainsaw or my skill saw, or got a lot of saws out right now, and we'll just cut your toy in two, and each of you can have half. How does that sound to you? But in this case, though, we're dealing with a living human being and a young person. The king said, divide the living child in two, just cut the kid in half, and give half to the one and half to the other. And right away, the woman whose son was living spoke to the king, for she yearned with compassion for her son. And she said, oh, my Lord, give her the living child, and by no means kill him. If you had the opportunity to save your child's life, but the child couldn't live with you any longer, say as a 4 or 5-year-old on up, would you rather the child die, or would you rather the child go to another home and to continue life? That would be very difficult. Sad as a parent. Nevertheless, we would all make the same decision. Well, we want life for our child, and immediately the one who actually has this living child says, no, whatever it takes for this child to live, that's okay. Just let her have my son. Just don't kill the kid. The other said, well, that sounds like good advice to me. No, let's do what the king suggested. Let him be neither mine nor yours, but divide him. Let's cut him in half right now. Okay, now go back to, what's the business of these ladies again? They're prostitutes. From that alone, probably right now, if you're selling your body just to make money, moral compass, all right? Now, one probably, or hopefully, has a little more morality than the other one, but it may just be because it's her child also. So if you're wondering, what in the world? Well, remember, I don't think these are two people that are trying to live by God's standards right now. But the king answered and said, all right, give the woman the living child. By no means kill the child. She's his mother. We can move on from here. Who wants to read the reaction, hopefully quote it to us, the reaction of the entire country whenever they hear of these events? I don't know about you, but I'm still, and of course we've known this story, most of us from childhood, but I'm still blown away. How incredible is that? The insight. 1 Kings 3:28. Go right ahead. So when they hear about it, they have the same reaction that you and I have about it, even though this is the 100th time that we've heard this story. Wow, this is impressive. But remember, for us, this is a king that lived and died 3,000 years ago. I mean, this is their ruler right then and there. What would you think about having such a godly servant in place with such intellect and ability to cultivate that and a desire to serve the Lord? How would you like to have that as a ruler of our people today, and to know for the next X amount of decades that's probably what we're going to have? Go ahead, Ray. Yeah, interesting. Huh. Yeah, that's interesting. Thanks for sharing. So everyone in Israel's super impressed with their king, very happy that he's in place. He's shown tremendous judgment. All right, let's talk a little more about politics. First 6 verses of chapter 4. So King Solomon was king, and over all Israel, he's in control. And these were his officials: Azariah, the son of Zadok, the priest, Elihoreph, and Ahijah, the sons of Shisha, scribes, a personal favorite, Jehoshaphat, the son of Ahilud, the recorder. Now, if you go back to, let's take just a moment, turn to 2 Samuel chapter 8, and I want to be reminded, several of these, they're not really new names, but in 2 Samuel 8, we read in verse 16, and this has to do back during the reign of our second king, the predecessor and the father of this gentleman, David. 2 Samuel 8:16, Joab, the son of Zeruiah, was over the army. He's not around anymore. Why is Joab not in the administration at this point? What's happened with Joab? He dead. Why he dead? There we go. Yeah, he's executed by the king. He can't be trusted. Okay, and remember the king went through this purging of a lot of the administration that was in place. But then as we read down, you'll find some familiar names in verse 16 of 2 Samuel 8. And Jehoshaphat, the son of Ahilud, was recorder. You read about Zadok down below, the son of Ahitub, and going down. So there are several that do stand out. They're still in place. So some aren't around. In fact, they're not even alive anymore because of their infidelity in the kingdom. But then there are some that are true and have proven their trustworthiness, and the king hangs on to them. And he's showing wisdom in getting rid of the moles in the administration. But he's also showing wisdom in keeping the people in place who are loyal to his father, David, the king. All right, continuing on down into verse number 4. Benaniah, by the way, that's not a new name also. We won't read more about each one of these. But Benaniah, the son of Jehoiada, who's been the executioner in some of these missions. Over the army, Zadok and Abiathar, the priest. Azariah, the son of Nathan. And that could be there of Nathan the prophet, would make a lot of sense. He was over the officers. Zebud, the son of Nathan, again, maybe the same one, a priest and the king's friend. Ahishar over the household, and Adoniram, the son of Abda, over the labor force. So he's weeded out the people who shouldn't be there. He's kept the people that are good, and he's brought in other people who are talented, and he feels like he ought to be able to trust, showing wisdom and putting the right kind of people in power underneath him. Shows a lot of wisdom in his economic policies. Now, I'm going to say with an asterisk, and I'll tell you why here in just a moment. I don't believe it's flawless, but he does show some wisdom in this. Verse 7, and Solomon had 12 governors over all Israel. Now, why would 12 make a lot of sense here? Okay, yeah, you would think one for each tribe. You would think one for each tribe. Hang on to that. There's not one for each tribe. But that would make a lot of sense. We are going to find there are 12 divisions, however, and it would add up because there are 12 tribes, but that's not the case. So Solomon had 12 governors over all Israel who provided food for the king and his household. Each one made provision for 1 month of the year. And so it's not everybody all the time, but we see this like we do with the priests and so on, taking turns, those serving in the military, 1 month of the year. These are their names. Ben-Hur, you've probably heard of him. Ben-Hur in the mountains of Ephraim, Ben-Decker in Makaz, Sha'al-Bim, Beth-Shemesh, and Elon Beth-Hanan. Ben, a lot of Bens here. Ben-Hesed and Arubath. To him belong Sokah and all the land of Hepher. If you can imagine, Abinadab. And all the regions of Dor. He had Tephath, the daughter of Solomon. Okay, that's noteworthy. The daughter of Solomon, his wife. So, not a bad idea to incorporate people in from the family. Ba'anah, the son of Ahilud and Ta'anak, Megiddo, and all Beth-Shean, which is beside Zeraton, below Jezreel, from Beth-Shean to Abel-Meholah, as far as the other side of Jokneam. Ben-Geber. That was probably Ben-Geber, but anyway. Another Ben, in Ramoth-Gilead. To him belong the towns of Jair, the son of Manasseh, in Gilead. To him also belong the region of Argob and Bashan. 60 large cities with walls and bronze gate bars. Ahinadab, the son of Iddo, and Mahanaim. Ahit-Maaz, and Naphtali. He also took Basemath, the daughter of Solomon, as wife. Sometimes smart to incorporate from the family. And the Bahanah, the son of Hushai, and Asher, and Eloth. Jehoshaphat, the son of Peruah, and Issachar. Shemai, the son of Elah, and Benjamin. So we're getting some more familiar names here. Geber or Geber, the son of Uri, or Uri, in the land of Gilead. By the way, Gilead's on which side? Jordan River. St. Robert. Okay, St. Robert side. Okay. Where are we? Right here. Sorry, we're in verse 19. Thank you. In the land of Gilead, in the country of Sihon, king of the Amorites. Again, that's on the east side, St. Robert direction. And of Og, king of Bashan. He was the only governor who was in the land. Okay, I know we went through that pretty quickly. A lot of names and territories that are under discussion there. What I'd like to do is just show a map, and I think this helps because we're not told every individual tribe, but a number of these are locations within tribes. And so there are 12 administrative districts into which much, it's not all, you would think all, probably should have been all. All right, 12 administrative districts into which these are broken up. And do you recall in the beginning, what's the whole purpose of this? What's going on? Solomon's trying to make sure he's hungry, okay? All right, king's hungry and he wants food to eat. And all of the king's forces and all of the king's men, we're going to find, they want food. And how are they going to get their food? Oh, well, people are going to provide for that. And of course, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. If you have public servants, who should take care of the public servants? You can make a case for the public. And we're not going to get into, everyone's viewpoint on taxes and all that kind of thing. But the money has to come from somewhere. And you have people who are serving the public. It makes a lot of sense that the public is going to help to take care of those needs. And so Solomon, in his wisdom, he sees the need for this kind of structure, and he sets up all of these districts. Okay, So this map hopefully will help us out. What do you notice about these 12 districts? Okay, we talked about there are 12 tribes of Israel, but if you notice, not all the 12 tribes are included in this slicing and dicing. And actually, there's only one listed up here, but there are actually two because one's inside of this one. So obviously, Judah's left out. Anyone, can you pick up on which one's inside of? Does anybody recall that? Okay, super close. Good, super close, but that's just a little bit to the north. That's going to be the 11 range, so you're right. It certainly boundaries it. It's Simeon. You remember that? Is inside of. Okay? Is inside of. So it appears these two are being left out, but I really think, and that's why on the map you see it as it is, the big significant one being Judah. So if our information here is correct and we're understanding it properly, everyone's helping to take care of the public servants, everyone except for, it's almost like Judah's being exempted from this. Now, do you recall in our Bible studies and all these discussions that we've been having this strong divide in this territory of the Promised Land? What have we been calling these two sections for a long time? Much like our nation's history. You have the north and you have the south. What do you mean by that? Well, if you're from the south, you're not from the north. And if you're from the north, you are not from the south, okay? You tend to look at life differently. And that's the case with these people. As we go back, and I know there have been some topsy-turvy moments, but for the most part, who has shown loyalty to David and to his household? The south, Judah. And it's strange that in all of this slicing and arrangement of these districts of everyone who's going to be paying in these taxes, the bottom one's not mentioned. Solomon's very wise and understanding. If you're going to have this huge bureaucracy, which he's creating, okay? And early on, things go really well. And I think in part from that, they're going to go south, no pun intended, very quickly. But he has all this power, and he sees we need this. The public needs to, but he doesn't include the South, paying into, from what we're told here, this system. And I think this is a second chink in the armor that we're starting to see. Now, we're going to find out. Things are going very well in Israel overall, and that's true of the North and the South. But do you think people don't understand that? Do you think everyone's on board with this plan? I'm sure everyone in the South loves it. They think this is the way it ought to be. But I'm going to guess that some in the North are probably resenting the king because of this. What's going to happen? I know we're a few studies away from this. What's going to happen at the death of Solomon? That North and South, finally, that fracturing that's been going on for decades, and really by this point, centuries, is finally going to rupture. And it's going to be an issue in large part over taxation, is what we're going to find. And by the way, in our own country, in the formation of it, in small part, maybe large part, not in its entirety, is over taxation, difference in view. The fracture that took place in our nation's history long after the Revolutionary War, about 100 years down the line, it took place because of a difference of view in bureaucracy. And I know there are other issues that led into it. Once again, you have those who believe in a strong centralized government, others that don't want the government to have that much power. And so, this is nothing new. And it's amazing, looking even at our own nation's history, 3,000 years later, we repeat everything that happened during Bible times. I think there's some good lessons that we can take from this. So Solomon, just to reiterate where we are and what's going on, he shows wisdom and understanding. If you're going to have this huge group of public servants, you're going to have the public taking care of them, but maybe he doesn't show quite as much wisdom as he should have in equally distributing this tax burden. He leaves some out. By the way, from where do Solomon and from where did Daddy come? What area? Right around there, right? Bethlehem, which isn't very far at all away from Jerusalem. So maybe as well showing some partiality to his family and to his people back at home. Okay, so here's where we are. We're through verse 19. Well, we have several minutes left. That's good. Okay, so verse 20. Judah and Israel, I mentioned this to you just a moment ago. Now here's the biblical backing for the statement. Judah and Israel were as numerous as the sand by the sea in multitude. Why do you think that is important, that God includes that detail in Scripture? That's the promise that goes back to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12. And this is being fulfilled a millennium down the road, and it has through the years also, but it just continues to be fulfilled. Judah and Israel, as numerous as the sand by the sea in multitude, eating and drinking and rejoicing. The eating and drinking tells you what about things in Israel right now? I'm sorry? Good. Success, okay, and they have plenty, right? It seems like they're probably, maybe even to the degree of wealthy. We'll see if that checks out. But certainly if they have more than enough, that they're overflowing in goods, okay, and also that they're rejoicing. Times aren't really sad, which probably goes to they're successful and possibly to the extent of being wealthy. Maybe what else? In this time of the world, in the Bible in particular, you're reading about all kinds of what taking place all around the known world. There's war, there's fighting constantly. That's not going on right now. There's just a lot of peace that's being enjoyed. There is tons of turmoil during the reigns of Saul and even of David. Not really happening during the reign of Solomon. Verse 21, so Solomon reigned over all kingdoms. Okay, not just him, but I mean, this is a world power, which is crazy to think about the nation of Israel at any point. This is a superpower in the world back in this time. Solomon reigned over all kingdoms from the river. The river, like a really impressive one. What's that one? Sometimes called the Great River in Scripture. That's the Euphrates, okay, and then you have the Tigris to the north some, and really a little more to the east of it, so slightly northeast. But the great river in the Bible, or the river as it's often stated, is the Euphrates, and you can see in that yellow shaded, I wish I could show you on here, but just a little bit to the east, and you have the Jordan River Valley, the Dead Sea, the Jordan River, the Sea of Galilee. Okay, I mean, mainly Israel in the Bible is just that little western portion right there on the eastern Mediterranean seaboard. But it extends all the way up to the northeast, the dominance, to the Euphrates River, and then it even goes down to the south and also to the southwest. Solomon reigned over all kingdoms from the river, the Euphrates, to the land of the Philistines, that's to the west, that's going to be to the Mediterranean Sea, as far as the border of Egypt. Okay, so from the Euphrates all the way down to the border of Egypt. Why is that an important detail for God to tell us right here? Marty, this is your time. Keep it going. There you go, very good. So it's the promise made to Abraham. Look back into it. I don't think we're going to have time to, but in Genesis chapter 15, when the promise is reiterated several years down the road, he says, hey, whenever the time's right, and this vision at night, really probably more of a dream, that he tells Abraham, God does to him, that I'm going to bring your descendants into this place, and they're going to take over the land of the Hittites and the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And, okay, we know all those. That's the land of Canaan. But he says, I'm going to give you as far as to the river, the great river, all the way down to the river of Egypt, which isn't the Nile River, but it seems to be the bordering slight body of water that comes out to the edge of the territory of Egypt. This is the fulfillment. And I think God is showing you can trust me whenever I make a promise to you. Yeah, it's 1,000 years later, but it's true, isn't it? It just took a while for you to see what I saw all along. They brought tribute, and they served Solomon all the days of his life. So money and goods are not only coming in from the northern tribes, but as well from the peoples all around. Verse 22, now Solomon's provision, listen to this, for one day, I'm going to switch over here. I'm not going to read from the New King James, from the English Standard, from the NIV, because it really doesn't make a lot of sense to you. I'm going to read from the CEV on this one. Every day, Solomon needed 150 bushels of fine flour, 300 bushels of coarsely ground flour, 10 grain-fed cattle, 20 pasture-fed cattle. You think he might be just a little picky about his food. 100 sheep. Oh, and then you have some wild game here. Some deer also will mix in, and gazelles and geese. One day, that's what's required to take care of the king and his family, as well as his administration. James Smith, in his commentary, states such a quantity of bread and meat would feed at least 14,000 people. One day, 14,000 people. Think government might be growing a little bit in Israel? Verse 24, for he had dominion over all the region on this side of the river, from Tipsah even to Gaza, as you can see on the map, namely over all the kings on this side of the river, and he had peace on every side all around him. So that goes back to the reigns of Saul, 40 years, the reigns of Saul, 40 years, David, 40 years. War, for much of it. Peace, 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 peace. Everywhere around. Why do you think that is? From the day he steps into office, his respect is for God Almighty, and he just wants to do his will. He doesn't have all the answers to life, but he's the first one to tell you that. He's the first one to tell God that. And he says, God, I need your help. You'll give me anything great. Would you please give me as much wisdom as heaven will pour into my heart? Because that's what I need more than anything else. And God blesses him immensely. He gives success not only to Solomon, to his family, to his administration, but as well it bleeds over into the entire country. There's no war that's going on. And Judah and Israel dwelt safely, each man under his vine and his fig tree. They don't have to go off and leave their families to fight in these conflicts. From Dan, north as far as Beersheba, south, all the days of Solomon. Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen. Okay, I know we're running out of time, so we're not going to read about this. But this is a little bit of an uh-oh, I think. Why? Okay, yeah, are you trusting maybe in the wrong thing? Or someone could say, well, he's trusting in God, but he also likes his horses and his bows and arrows and his spears. And well, Deuteronomy chapter 17. God gave rules for Israel. He says, when you come into the land, I'm fast forwarding for you for 500 years, but you're going to make a dumb choice, and you're going to say, we want a king over us like all the other nations. And whenever you do, you have to choose a king from among your people. But here are some rules concerning your king. One of which is, he shall not multiply his horses. Well, Solomon only had 40,000 stalls. I mean, and 12,000 horsemen. And these governors, each man in his month, we see these little chinks in the armor. I think they start to pile up over time. In the beginning, he's doing great in the worship of God. God says, except he's still offering sacrifices in the high places. I don't really like that, but... And then he starts multiplying his horses. God says, I said not to do that, but overall he seems to be doing a pretty good job. And these governors, each man in his month, provided food for King Solomon and all who came to King Solomon's table. There was no lack in their supply. They also brought barley and straw to the proper place for the horses and steeds. Those are the war horses. Each man according to his charge. Verse 29, and God gave Solomon wisdom and exceedingly great understanding, and largeness of heart, maybe better mind, like the sand on the seashore. It's not just a big head, it's full of stuff. And it's like the space just continues to grow. It's like our little flash drives. They get smaller and smaller, but they hold more and more stuff. Okay, he has so many gigabytes upstairs that he can hold everything. He's a sponge in learning. Thus Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the men of the east and all the wisdom of Egypt. He was wiser than all men, than Ethan the Ezrahite, Heman, Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahol, and his fame was in all the surrounding nations. He spoke 3,000 proverbs. By the way, it's sad that we only have about a third of those recorded. But he spoke 3,000 proverbs. His songs were 1,005. It's tragic that we only have 3 that have survived. Psalms 72, 127, and the Song of Solomon. But he had 1,005 that he wrote. Also, he spoke of trees, from the cedar tree of Lebanon, could tell you every fact about them, even to the hyssop, that springs out of the wall. He spoke also of animals, of birds, of creeping things, and fish. He knows everything about everything. He's one of those guys. And men of all nations, from all the kings of the earth who had heard of his wisdom, they came to hear the wisdom of Solomon. Have you ever seen or heard about someone who's just so impressive what they know, all the things? I'll tell you someone that comes to my mind, Ken Jennings. 74 Jeopardy episodes. We played Bible Jeopardy a while back. That's not an easy game, right? 74 of the smartest people in the world, bam, 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 just knocks them out one after another, 74 times in a row. Pretty impressive. Seems like the guy knows everything about everything. It's kind of crazy to think, though, this dude would pale in comparison. Could you imagine Solomon on Jeopardy? He might never lose. I mean, seriously, that's how much knowledge was packed into his head. But the coolest thing about him is not just all the things that he knows and he's learned. What's so impressive about Solomon? It's really his wisdom. In every situation, he knows what to do and what to say. In every situation, he knows what not to say and what not to do. Ken Jennings, I'm going to suggest to you, is nothing brilliant. Is nothing compared to Solomon. But then this guy shows up 2,000 years later and he says, oh, you were impressed with Solomon, all of his wisdom, and everyone came from the ends of the earth to hear him. Well, I'm here today to tell you that there's someone standing in your presence greater than Solomon. Who's that guy? The one that Solomon was intended to foreshadow all along. It's really cool to study about Solomon and to learn all these things about his life. But let's not forget that he is a ruler or prince of peace for a reason. Let's not forget that he builds the house of God's worship for a reason. Let's not forget that he's handpicked by God as his own son, he says, for a reason. He's so full of knowledge and of wisdom for a reason, because he perfectly, almost, foreshadows the Lord himself in every way. Okay, we're out of time. Sorry to run you just a little bit late. For the next time we get together, I'm planning on getting through all of chapter 5. It's a shorter one. Memorize verse 12, chapter 5. Verse 12, opened up. Any very brief final thoughts? Yes, ma'am. Right. Sure. Yeah. Bingo. Not rocket science, isn't it? Even for the smartest of people, keep it simple. Very good, Rebecca. Thank you. Okay, appreciate it, everybody.